Hey guys, it's Melissa here from melissaoatman.com. Welcome to another episode of Awaken Your Inner Awesomeness. I am so delighted you're here with me today because we have a very special guest. Today we have with us Miss Laurie Rivers, who is a consulting astrologer, and she's here today to talk about astrology and how it can help us. She helps women and other people in business with astrology, but she's here today to talk to us about what it is and how we can use it. So thank you so much, Laurie, for being here with us today.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm so excited that you're here because I know a little about astrology, but not an expert. So I'm always happy when I can
Mhm.
have somebody here who is an expert who can teach us all things astrology. But before we jump in and get started with that, I'd love it if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you start getting into astrology?
Well, I've lived an interesting life. I guess that's the best way to start. When I was a young person, I took a one-way ticket. I was 18. I took a one-way ticket to London and studied in university, not because I was rich. Nope. I paid my own way and I worked real hard. I came from a family. And metaphysics was hitting me straight between the eyes, which I didn't like because I was a first gen college student and I was the first woman and I was a rational, logical person, don't you know? And I was a political scientist. And yet the universe would not leave me alone. And so I stumbled upon a little alleyway, and I swear it's what Diagon Alley and Harry Potter's based off of. But it is the most incongruous street in this part of London where everything is gray and white and austere. And there's a little red brick road with little lace curtains and windows in the buildings and little geraniums. And I was like, what's down there? And then there was a big purple building with the word mysteries on top of it. And I was 18. And I went in, and that's when I had my first tarot reading. So that was my gateway. In 95, living in the Middle East, I volunteered in my spare time at the first internet cafe. I would teach computers to how to use computers to the patrons in exchange for time because it was expensive to be online. And I went down rabbit holes. I was seeking answers because I had checked off all the boxes. I had attained success nobody in my family had. And I was miserable and I couldn't understand it. And so psychology wasn't answering my questions. It could today, but back then we didn't know what we know now. Nothing was answered. So I was on this spiritual quest. And I found a message board owned by the famous British astrologer Jonathan Caner. He used to be a TV personality back in the day. And I went on and I asked some questions, and somebody adopted me and said they sent me a 20-page email, no joke. And at the end of it said, I'd love to teach you. You were born to be an astrologer. And my response was, thank you very kindly. I'm going to figure out how you know this about me, and I'm going to prove astrology wrong.
Wow.
Oops. So here we are 3 decades later. But that is, and it's been a wild and wacky road. And
Don't you love how the universe just throws you into things? And I had a psychic come up to me and say, "You're supposed to be doing this," and I thought that was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard in my life. And I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?"
Right? Yeah. And then the weirder, the better. But that it takes time to get used to that, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that was the start.
So you're using astrology to help business owners, correct? That's what you mostly do.
Um, yes, I help people at all levels, whether it's career or business, because not everybody is entrepreneurial. Not everybody is a business owner, but everybody deserves to be actualized. So yes, I do a variety of consults, but I love doing the business ones because that way people aren't following a cookie cutter mode. They're not having, a lot of times if you're a spiritual person, especially, or a conscious person, when you look at traditional business, you go, oh, or I'm going to have to compromise my values. I'm going to have to compromise my principles. And you don't have to. Your chart shows everything, every facet about your life. There's nothing it doesn't cover, and we can work on the strategies. So, yeah.
So for those out there listening who they probably heard of astrology before, but most people, when we think about it, we think about, oh, Taurus, your astrology reading for the month of May is this. So if you could explain it, I know it's not probably the easiest, shortest explanation, but what is astrology for those out there listening who only know it as the horoscopes that they put in the newspaper?
Well, the horoscope, the actual horoscope, which is a natal chart or a birth chart, and actually everything, every event, every puppy, every kitty, every tree, if you knew when it was planted and germinated, every person has a birth chart, and it is based on the day, the time, and the place you were born. And it is a map of the sky. And astrology, it isn't that anything happens to you. Okay. It reflects what's going on for you, and you have agency. So the old stuff can be a little bit like fate and deterministic, but we have more agency than we think. Sometimes there's not as much wiggle room, but most times we get to control some measure, maybe not the circumstances, but how we deal with it. So your whole chart is you. You're not just your sun sign. There isn't one part of the chart that's more important than the other. And if the horoscopes in the newspaper or on a blog or video don't resonate, it's because you've got the sun, moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, plus what we call the lunar nodes, plus any other, depending on the astrologer, planetary body. You could fill that whole thing up with stars and planets and all kinds of things. So you have all 12 signs, even the ones you don't like. I tell you, we are complex. And so why we have like sun sign astrology is because most people didn't know what time they were born. When astrology kind of had a heyday in the 19th century, printing got cheaper, and people decided, oh, we're going to get this out to the people instead of just holding it for the very wealthy, because traditionally the average person did not have access to it. So they went to sun signs because people might know the day they were born. Sometimes there are places in the world today that people still don't know what day they were born. So not everybody had access to it until the 19th and 20th centuries. So there's that.
So when you're using these birth charts, it's essentially what you're looking at is someone's birth chart, which has all of these different placements. So you could be like a sun sign Taurus, but you could be a moon sign Scorpio or something. You have the different placements in all of your chart.
Yeah.
What does that tell you for, let's say that it is a person who is an entrepreneur and they come to you and they have their own business and they're wanting to know how this astrology can help them in their business. What are the kinds of things that you can get from looking at their birth chart?
What kind of products or services they should offer? So a lot of times people think they need to write the book to be seen as an expert. Some people, that's a solid yes. Other people, no. They could just start teaching classes, or they could have a podcast, or maybe they're more suited to real estate or a brick and mortar. Maybe they're not going in, they're doing what everybody told them to do instead of listening inside. And if you've never been trained how to listen to yourself, then it's hard to know. So I help tune people and say, okay, feel into this, feel in your body. How does it feel when we mention this? And I'll bring up the parts of the body that rules. I'm like, how's your head feeling? How's your shoulders feeling? And getting people awareness on the inside. So it's a combination. It's not just, oh, do this formula and you'll be rich.
Right.
You also have to know, like, most people focus on the money, but the money is a tool. Okay, money is a tool. And what is that tool getting you? For some people, it is experiences. For some people, like me, I am really good at business, but I don't care about money. I either have it or I don't have it. I'm good, but I love to pay people. Oh my gosh, that is the coolest part. That's a motivator. Okay. Some people, it is acquisition. They're actually in the minority. Most people are looking for some level of comfort. Most of us are driven by fear because we're afraid and in this society, we have every right to be afraid. Healthcare costs, housing, education for our kids, our families. We're looking for stability, but you can't just say, I want financial freedom, because freedom is different to you and it's different to Susie and it's different to John. We have to know that definition. That's what I help people see in their chart.
So you can see what motivates
Yes.
someone.
Yeah.
I
What
think that is
motivates?
really
Yeah.
important. Yeah, because a lot of people, I don't think, even understand what motivates themselves.
No.
And I thought this was interesting because we were talking a little bit before we got on the podcast, and you said you even use the astrology to help parents.
Yes. In
How
fact,
are
that's
you
where
able
I
to do that?
started.
Really? Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually long before I ever got interested in business, because like a lot of spiritual people, I was taught, ooh, business bad, money bad. And then I realized me like food. But anyway, again, nobody comes into metaphysics at a deep level, or astrology or psychology or any of these fields, if they don't have a reason, right? And so when I found astrology, or it found me, my daughter was 2 years old. And so besides my chart, her chart was the first I looked at. And I was just learning. So I didn't have all the information. I was just learning, but she had some placements that there was no way I could not understand. And it made me either the greatest goddess in the world, larger than life, or the biggest, scariest person she ever met. And I was horrified. And I was reactive. I'd had a lot happen to me in my childhood. I wanted to be a good parent. And so I was like, well, if I don't get me together, I'm going to end up being that big, scary monster. And I couldn't conceive of being that for her. That I just did not want to, by being emotionally reactive. So that was the start of a lot of hard work. And then I became a parenting instructor from 2001 to about 2015. But it wasn't like how to raise your kids. It was a communications course. So in astrology, your birth chart is your personality. You're born with a personality. The blank slate theory was proved wrong by neuroscientists like 10 years ago, 12 years ago, which I always thought that was dumb because I noticed my kids' personalities, that each one was different. So I practiced on that myself, just out of my own desire to be a good mother. And then helping other people see their children's individuality, their sensitivity. A lot of times we want to give our kids what we didn't have, but they have needs that might be different. They might be the same. They might be ending a family pattern that we've been working on, but they may have, like, you may have wanted your mom to talk to you a lot, and you might have a kid who's like, let's pass notes under the door. I had one of each, so it allows you to tailor your communications and understand the lessons you're gaining from the child as well. That to understand there might be some tension as individuation happens. There might be some tension in these spaces, and it's what's teaching you both. And it's that mutuality in the relationship and the recognition that children are people. They are people with their own personalities. And that's kind of counterculture still.
Yeah.
You'd think
it
it
is.
wouldn't be in the 21st century, but it still is.
Yeah.
And so I get a lot of really intentional parents, and I love those readings. So to me, it's no different than raising a child, raising a business. If you're a person of service, you want to do your very best job so it benefits as many people as possible without losing yourself in the process. So that's what astrology, paired with lots of other cross training, because again, each one of those symbols means about 100,000 different things. And if you haven't studied a lot of things, it's hard to interpret and that's what I specialize in, is interpretation. So it's expansive when you do it with an open mind.
Well, what an excellent tool to have in your arsenal as a parent, because I always joke and say, you go to buy a new car and they give you a 1,000-page manual, and you have a kid and they send you home with one little piece of paper and say, congratulations, good luck. And you think, okay, like, you trust me this much, and yet I have no clue what I'm doing.
Oh, yeah.
So all of the tools that you can collect to help you as a parent, those are so beneficial. And it would be such a great way to know your child more and what they need, because they don't really ever come right out and tell you what they need as a child, right?
Because they can't necessarily verbalize it.
Right.
They can't, it's just who they are, So, I mean, just think about it. I mean, I know it took me forever to be able to verbalize my needs, It's like, what do you mean people can't intuit what I need? Doesn't everybody need the same thing? Doesn't everybody like their spaghetti cooked the same way? Oh my gosh, no. Right?
No, some people put ketchup in their spaghetti.
Yeah.
I don't know who those people are, but it happens.
My mom used to mix the sauce in with the noodles, and the first time I had spaghetti with the sauce done properly, I was like, what was that? I was about 7 or 8. I was like, what is that? And so that's and our normal is our normal. And so we don't know. And so it's helpful for any age. I think it's a little early if it's a baby, because a lot of times you're so nervous when you're brand new mama, that what I mostly do in those readings is reassure them and give them some tools and lessen the anxiety, just because, one, we're not meant to be perfect, but effective is great.
Yeah.
We're never going to be perfect. We're not here to be perfect, and we will make mistakes, but it's just going to happen. So, it's just going to happen. I had one child who was very, very verbal, and I had another child who was not really, and especially in expressing emotions, and yet they're an artist. And so there was a lot of art supplies, there was a lot of, and once they did the art project, then they could talk about it, and so we did a lot of art with that one. And then the other one, I never had to guess, just very verbal. And each one has a very different chart, so I had similar rules. Like, you can have household rules,
Right,
you can't leave yourself out too, because it'd be like, all right, if you make a mess, you clean it up,
Yeah.
But one might need a little more side by side with that when they were little, and the other might be more independent on it. So they're not necessarily always being bad. Sometimes they have different ways of being, and that's important.
And that's my children are like night and day too. And my son needed space when he was upset before he could then talk to him. And my daughter she didn't need that. So it was completely different, but it's always trial and error. You do the same thing until you realize it's not working.
Yeah, exactly. And you only have the tools you have. Yeah. And so you do the best you can, and it helps make sense of things too. Be like, oh, oh, that's why I do that. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why we butt heads over this, or this is why we get along over this. And it just helps clarify it, which is really nice. And it's that way. This is called synastry. And most people think about synastry for romance, but synastry is just comparing two people's charts and seeing how the energy interacts. And I love it because it helps people problem solve. It helps people, whether it's partners in business, or I've worked with real estate teams, and not to say, oh, get rid of that person, but more like, this is how you best communicate. This person needs lists and needs the whiteboard. This person needs a lunchtime chat. This person, you don't talk to them in the morning. You wait until 11, and just eat. And so knowing that, whether it's a business partner situation or a parent child, marriage partners, although I will say romance is my least favorite kinds of readings.
Well, that brings me to an interesting thing too. So do you use the astrology to help people, like if they're trying to find a partner, like a relationship? Do you ever use that to help people with that? Or is that one of those things where you're like, no, it's just so, it's not something I do.
People would be very disappointed coming to me for a reading like that, because I'm going to say you have to give it to yourself. I'll tell timing. So like when I'm doing what's called a transit reading, so I call them astro energies readings. When I do a transit reading, I can see if there's a window, and if I'm very, I usually say about 60 to 80% certain, I'll say something. If it's I'm not sure, it's probably not likely. But if I see a window up, I'm like, hey, you single? Because you're gonna have some fun.
Yeah.
But in general, when people do ask, and it comes up a lot in readings, and everybody wants to be loved, but we have to be giving it to us first. And so thank heavens Miley Cyrus came out with her song, because now I can just say, go listen to Miley Cyrus's Flowers.
Yeah.
I can buy myself flowers, because we've been so indoctrinated by society and culture to have our value reflected by being in a partnership, instead of having the partnership be a reflection of the value we find in and of ourselves. And
Yeah.
who's learned the hard way? Oh, wait, me.
Yeah.
Astrology helps make sense of that. But what are your relationship needs? What do you need, like breathing? For some people, love languages, right? Well, there's 12 zodiac signs, so there's way more than 5 love languages. And then what house is it in the chart? There's 12 houses, so there's quite a few combinations. So some people do need more physicality, or more time together, or more communication. Some people don't need that communication. Everybody says, oh, it's all communication. Well, some people are more dude nod, and
Yeah.
it's not just because they weren't trained to communicate. They might be more intuitive, and they need a more sensitive person, or somebody who can catch the subtle cues. Other people need big demonstrations of it. It's not insecurity, because they'll shower it. And I always say, if one area of life is impacted, every other area is. So, because Venus is the planet that rules attraction. Okay, so if law of attraction had a planet, it would be Venus. Okay, and we've all been trained in a very Martian society. Go do it. Hustle, 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 hustle. Bang your head against a wall, and oh no, if you don't get success, it's your fault, right? Because you didn't hustle, hustle, hustle.
Right.
How it works. It's not how the universe works. It's not how quantum physics works. It's not how we work. We have not learned to know what our own value system is on the inside, and we have to kind of deconstruct our programming and understand, what is it you need, like breathing. And again, for some people, it is quiet and peace. For other people, it's running and activity and playing, being sporty and go, go, go. For other people, it's being heard. Other people like to listen. And so it's making sure instead of working off your cultural and social training. And that's where most of us are. And by the way, we're never done unpacking it. You get ahas the rest of your life. But it's good to know and give that to you, and then you find the right match, because otherwise we're going to keep learning the lesson as we go on the dating game, or and we can find it. Like, I thought I had codependency licked. I had worked for 20 years on it, and this like 10 years ago, and I was working with clients as a coach, and I did astrology kind of under the radar. I was referral only on astrology, or with my coaching clients if they were open to it. And it would take a conversation and be like, all right, I think this person's open to it, because where I lived, it wasn't a good thing to be public. And so, and my kids were teenagers, and they didn't need mom to be that weird. So I had clients, lost my train of thought. I had clients who the codependency. I had clients who I took too much responsibility for. I gave too much. I over delivered, because you'll hear in the online space, over deliver. Well, I took on all their responsibility, and I was like, oh wait, I didn't clean it up. And then I looked at my own astrology chart, and I was like, oh yeah, you have this tendency to pull the cart, and I can blame everybody else for it. Oh, why am I pulling the cart? Why aren't they doing their share? Last I checked, they never asked me to pull the cart.
Yeah, you just did it.
I just did it because that's what I do. And so it's checking that, and not being like, oh, well, maybe we need to check in. And funny enough, the people who were a good residents handled the boundary well. When I would say, hey, I think I've taken on too much responsibility. It's an old habit. I want to apologize, because honestly, you're really, really capable, and I'm here to spot you. The ones that were ready to go with that were like, that's great. The ones who wanted to partner in that old pattern were not happy, and they'd move along, which was fine. And I'd mentally bless them, and thank them for the lesson. Be like, thank you for being part of that lesson. Never say it out loud.
Yeah.
It doesn't go over well. But it happens in all of our relationships, including our kids.
Yeah.
And our pets. I had one client go, I realized I was codependent with my dog. I was like, they cared way too much about what happened at doggy daycare.
Yeah.
I just thought that was cute, but it's a great example.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I can see how valuable that would be, to know the areas where you're going to struggle a little bit, because this might be like what you came here to learn. Like, oh, I'm the same. I was a people pleaser. I say I'm a reformed people pleaser, but I still work on that, and I still struggle with that, because I want to make people happy and make sure everybody's happy with things. And I just kind of had to get to the place where I realized you're not going to make everybody happy, and that's not really your job anyway. You've learned that it is your job, but it's not your job. So that's been a lesson, but I love that you can see that in your chart, because I think that would be so helpful if if you have this business and you can see, oh, okay, you're going to struggle with allowing others to come in and do their part, and you're going to try to do it all. You've got to learn not to do that. Or there's probably also, I'm sure you've seen this too, with people who have their business and maybe have worthiness issues, and so they have trouble charging people what they think they're worth.
It's very, I had that. It wasn't so much worth. It was and it wasn't. So like, I never thought, oh, I'm unworthy. But because I was an overachiever in school, they would make me help the other kids and give away my knowledge.
Yeah.
And so, which I love helping and teaching, teacher to the core, but I'd be like, oh, well, that's easy. Yeah, we should charge what we're good at. That's what we charge for. We don't have to be like, oh, well, this is hard, so I'm going to charge for that.
Yeah.
Easy doesn't mean it's not valuable. But yes, people who have self-esteem, self-worth, if you came from a toxic environment, you're used to having those toxic elements, you can end up being the toxic element to yourself. If you've gotten rid of everybody else, you can be the meanest boss. You could be, and so we can see all of that. And more than once I've looked at a client going, so are we being nice to ourselves, or are you a taskmaster? And they'll be like, no, I'm better. Okay. Yeah, I'm still, yeah. I'm like, okay, how's delegation going? All right, here's some strategies. And I do a lot of research too. So I don't just give, euphemisms and affirmations. I'll go study and scour. I research for fun. I'm a nerd. So I'll be like, hey, did you know the USDA has these grants for new farmers? Or because I get people from every industry you can imagine. If somebody wanting to get into politics, I'll be like, hey, here's some organizations that help new candidates. If it's somebody who's working in their community in a not-for-profit, I'll be like, oh, did you check out these resources? And sometimes it's a yes, sometimes it's, oh no, I hadn't heard of that. And I'll refer people to each other. If I see a great match, I'll be like, oh, you guys, there's somebody looking for this and you're doing this. All right, can I introduce you? Let me ask the other person, and I'll introduce them, because we're moving into bumpy times, and we are in bumpy times, and it's not going to smooth out right away. And the way we get through it is through collaboration. So
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that. And we can definitely feel those bumpy times right now, can't we?
yeah, it's been really bumpy.
It has, it has. So do you do just personal readings then? People can go to you and just order a reading and you go through their birth chart and
Mhm. I have astrologers I've trained to do the natal readings, the birth chart readings. So that just tells you about yourself as a person. And then for the consulting readings where I help you, like either with a business or parent-child reading or what's up for your year ahead, because those will open up in June. I do them twice a year ahead readings, because they have a lot of charts. So it's a month by month look at your year on your timing. They can book with me directly on my website. So yeah.
okay.
So
And
yeah.
you have a podcast as well, correct?
Do I have the Awake Astrology Podcast, and I give updates on the political brouhahas and the weather and seismic activity. Seismic activity is hard to predict, but I'm fairly accurate. I'm pinning the regions pretty well. It's not easy. That one's more of a challenge. And then I talk about how to like deal with the energy, give shout outs to my patrons, and what else do we do? Oh, and my patrons send in astrology questions and I answer those. And
Awesome.
then, yeah, that one's
You
fun.
answer
Sometimes I
the,
have guests, but
yeah,
it just depends on what's going on.
that sounds really interesting. I'm gonna have to check that out for sure. Especially interested in the what's going on in politics right now. I don't know. I think it's
Hmm.
really fascinating. So
It very much is. And last year I this is something I do on the Tiki Talkie. I do like little political analysis. That's kind of how I show myself as an accurate astrologer. It's not my favorite kind of astrology. I love esoteric astrology best, but I get people's attention because it's accurate. And I said that this year we'd have a constitutional crisis, and we very much have a constitutional crisis in
yeah,
like 6 different directions. It's wild. So it will, I believe, all resolve out.
that's
Um, yeah,
good to
I think we
know.
end up, yeah, it's going to be bumpy, but when I look out, I think we end up society wise better than we started. So, there may be challenges, but I think we end up better than we started.
So what's your favorite type of reading to do?
Oh, for those who know astrology, I have a Libra moon. It's hard to have favorites. I like them all. I can't choose. I go actually in waves. Um, I love the year ahead because they're meaty. They just take a lot of mental energy. Um, I think I really, of my favorites, I love parent child, because there's nothing nicer than, really, I will always advocate for the child, like primarily. Like I'm helping mama too, because helping mama be the best her or papa, because I get dads too. So the best parent they can be, um, helps them, but it supports that being into becoming who they came to be.
Yeah.
And that's, oh my God, that's an honor. To me, that's a sacred journey.
Hmm.
Um, but I enjoy the career life path readings. I get people of all ages, but I love it when I get the college kids, because they're fresh and moving on their journey, and encouraging them to, go for it. And yeah, here's where it's going to be challenging, but just keep going, and watching them grow is nice. So yeah. So there you go. Non-answer. I like them all, or I wouldn't do them. That's something about, if I don't like it, I don't do it. So,
Yeah.
which
Well,
is not
that
always
you
good.
answered that perfectly though, because I think it talked to the benefits of each kind of reading that you do,
Mm-hmm.
which is for anybody out there listening who thinks, oh, I might benefit from
Mm-hmm.
having a reading to figure out, am I on the right path? Am I,
Mm-hmm.
what challenges am I going to
Mm-hmm.
have if I were to start a business or to do this? And
Mm-hmm.
how can I work
Mm-hmm.
around that, knowing what I know about my birth chart?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And that's a gift, because otherwise you're like, I don't know. I'm
Yes.
going to do this
Wandering through
thing
life.
all these experts told me I should do, that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And it's so true because we're all so different and unique. And yet, when it comes to business, we tend to get the same advice and it's a one size fits all. And that's not really how it works for people. It's like you have to feel comfortable, I think, in what you're doing
Mm-hmm.
in
And it
order
takes a
to
while.
thrive. Yeah.
Yeah, it takes a while. I started my first business online, which wasn't I mean, I've been a professional astrologer. Again, I was referral only, but like what I considered a business, because I didn't see astrology as a business. Yes, I got paid, but I was an astrologer, and it wasn't business, and it was totally different. But it was like 2005. My daughter was 12, and I was a hand spinner, and I sold hand spun yarn, and I coded my own website, and I learned from that. I learned that I don't like doing physical products. I like sharing information. Other people don't like sharing information. They like to sell physical products. Um, I learned how to do all my web stuff. Um, I learned about marketing, like online marketing, which I knew about corporate marketing, but online marketing was different. How to write good email copy. All of those were business skills. And I
Yeah.
took time to acquire those. And my goal is once my youngest was grown, then I could go full bore, because my primary commitment was to my kids. I had them on purpose, and I
Yeah.
wanted to prove you could raise kids and they'd be relatively okay at the end. And they're both adults and they still talk to me. So
There you
I feel
go.
good about it. So they survived me. But yeah. So I mother sized my business, and not because we were rolling in it. The business helped pay for Taekwondo. It helped pay for art lessons and new shoes and prom dresses and all that fun stuff. But then it allowed me to have the skill set to then, because I knew 2020 everything was going to change. I watched that come for 20 years plus. I had an
Wow.
old teacher show me in 1996 and said, you need to be ready for this. So I built all those skills knowing I'd probably have to use them and then help other people, because everything would change post 2020, and it has, and it will continue to change. And so people being a little more independent but collaborative, and so helping people do that it's an honor.
Yeah. I love that. Well, I want to thank you so much for being here with us today. If there's anyone out there listening who maybe they want to get a reading or maybe they would just like to follow you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Go to wokeastrology.com, and that's the best way. All of the social media links are there. The booking descriptions are there. And if you have questions, you can contact me through the contact page.
Awesome.
And I
We'll have
see
that.
every email. So
Oh, good. Wow. Yeah, I
right. So
personally answer them. That's awesome.
yeah.
Well, we will have the link in the show notes too. So if anyone's interested in checking out your podcast or just going to see about a reading, they can go directly to that link and get there and they can find your beautiful soul. So I encourage you to go and check that out. And thank you again so much for being here with us today and sharing about astrology and what you do, because I think it's really important.
Thank you so much for having me, Melissa. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. And I want to thank all of you for being here with us today. As always, if you like this podcast, please subscribe. Please leave a positive review from wherever you're listening. And the greatest compliment you can pay me is to share this podcast with those you think might benefit. Also, I want to encourage you to join us on Patreon. You can sign up to get a free 7-day trial. There you'll see all of the extra goodies there, like videos of our interviews, and we do live card reading every week that you can take part in, and I will pull cards for you to give you some guidance for the week. Again, you can join for absolutely free 7 days, and then if you like it, you can continue on, and if not, no worries. There is no need to continue with the Patreon membership. So I hope you guys have a beautiful week. I am sending you so much love and light, and I will talk to you soon. Bye, guys.